Welcome back to Rad Pod, the show where we dive into the lives of fascinating people one conversation at a time. Today we have a guest who's lived multiple lives in one, it seems. Born and raised in LA, he dominated the field at Loyola High School with me, took his talents to Boise and Houston, and made his mark in the NFL before taking his game international to Japan. Lee Hightower is so much more than an athlete. He's a leader, a wellness entrepreneur, and a man on a mission to help people optimize their health and longevity. Before we dive in, shout out our sponsor, lifespark.bio, because if your swimmers are in shape, your game might not be as strong as you think. Lee, thanks for coming on, dude. Fired up to catch up. Can you introduce yourself for those who might not know you?
Yeah, for sure, man. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I am Lee Hightower. I was born and raised. Obviously, that intro was incredible. So you kind of hit everything. But born and raised in Los Angeles, lifetime athlete. Played football with Conrad at Loyola. Played at University of Houston and at Boise State University before I got a chance to be in the NFL. So bounced around a couple practice squads. Had a great experience in the NFL, and then once I got cut the last time, I was kind of trying to figure out where I was, like the lifestyle of being in hotels and kind of going from practice squad to get cut to, that lifestyle was like, okay, this is kind of old. I've realized my dream, but I want to kind of see something else. So at that time, I was actually looking to go to Mexico. Like I was really into food. So I was like, I'm going to go to Mexico. I'm going to go be a culinary chef. I'm going to go to culinary school, and that was what I was thinking at the time. And then I got this opportunity to go play in Japan. So an old teammate called me, said, "Hey, I just saw that you got cut. I don't know if you are still trying to play, but I got an opportunity in Japan." And initially I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to take maybe 1 year, 2 years, kind of like a little gap to just keep playing. And it turned into 5 years. The pandemic happened while I was there. And towards the end of it, once I knew that I was going to be done with football, I knew that I was going to want to get into wellness. So in my family's history, we have a lot of history of like preventable diseases and people in our family kind of passing early due to cardiovascular disease or having diabetes or cancer. So I knew that I wanted to make an impact in there because the common narrative around it is, oh, you have bad genes or the genes run in the family. But it didn't really work with my perception because I'm like, I just made a whole career. I went to school for free. I had a whole career based off of me and what I was able to do with my body. So for you to tell me that the older people in my family are supposed to just pass early because of their genes, like it never really sat well with me. So I knew I wanted to kind of change that narrative. And around the same time, like I said, I was into food. So like on my off seasons out here in Japan, I would run like a little pop up kitchen. And I really wanted to get into like the source of food. I really farm to table was starting to become really popular back then. So I went and lived on a farm, and that kind of changed my trajectory altogether. So I lived on a farm, and I'm thinking I'm just going to go here and learn how to farm so that I can get the best quality ingredients. But I realized what it was doing for my wellness being on the farm, especially coming outside of Tokyo. It was a farm out here in Japan, and I was just a lot more calm. I was seeing how the kids, it was a family farm, so I was seeing how they were growing up. And it really just shifted my whole perspective on wellness altogether and really realizing how, to me, like that is the foundation of wellness, like having a connection with nature and then also knowing where your food comes from. So long story to say that that's where I am today. Now I've started my own company, and we have two different branches. So we have like one-on-one health coaching where I really target leaders of companies, especially people doing social impact work, because I've noticed that a lot of those people end up giving and giving and giving and giving and don't take the time to take care of themselves. So I really see an opportunity to help those leaders so that the work that they do is sustainable and that they sustain themselves. And then there's the garden design component of it. So we are still finding our footing in that. So I have a project here in Japan that I'm working on or working to figure out exactly what it'll look like. And then there's also some school programs that we've been involved with back in LA of after school programs. So that one is less defined, but I know that the real focus of it is getting people more connected to nature and to their food as well.
Yeah, that's incredible, man. So many places we can go, and I definitely want to get through all of it. I'd love to go linearly. and definitely want to spend a lot of time on Bevida. But taking a step back to the start, so growing up in LA, what was that like from you? And then how was your experience at Loyola? And I remember you were just the epitome of a Loyola Cub man, right? Like a man for others, someone who dominates in the classroom, dominates on the field. How did your childhood shape you, and how did Loyola shape you to where you are now?
Wow, good question. Loyola, I would say the biggest thing that my childhood and Loyola did for me was it enabled me to be around every type of person and really develop a strong sense of who I am because there was every different type of person. Find that one of the things that I'm so grateful for my childhood is that I really hung out with people who were immigrants, like their families were just getting to America. And then I also hung out with people whose families were living in $1 million homes. And I knew people from the east side of Los Angeles. I knew people from the west side of Los Angeles. I knew people from Koreatown. And these were really my friends. Like our football teams had every type of person. So I think that foundation of really being able to authentically relate to people and have just a true connection that's based off of like who people are was something that I really, really take with me today. And then with the Loyola part, I think the brotherhood that we had was something like you and I, we haven't spoken in a while, but there's this instant connection, right? There was this foundation that was built that kind of spans time. Like I run into a Loyola guy and there's this sense of we've been through the same things together and we have like these core values that we stick to that are kind of timeless, that kind of whenever I run into another one, it's like, yo, brother, like we're fully connected. So I think those two things are things that I really appreciate and kind of hold with me, like that ability to connect with people from everywhere and then that real true understanding of like what brotherhood and what community is something that is a big part of what I'm doing now is kind of something that is always going to be attached. Even when I look back to it, like I never thought of myself as like a community organizer or someone who like builds community. But now that I'm looking at it, I'm like, I was always a part of such strong foundational communities that it really is something that is a through line.
Totally, man. And talk to me a little about football. You were one of the best players on our high school football team. If I remember correctly, you're going to go to Penn, and then you went to Boise, and then you went to Houston, and then you went to the Colts, and then you went to the Redskins, and then you went back to the Colts. Talk to me about football and just how it's shaped your life.
Man, football was everything. Football was like, first of all, when I just think about it, pretty much all of my friends are people that I played with. And there's a sense of we've all been through really hard things together that is hard to duplicate. And I think it's something that there's almost a sense of when I look at like the friendships that I build, it's like once I know how we deal with conflict, that's when I know that we've hit a new level of friendship. And football puts you in it immediately. Like you've got to get through conflict with these people. And so I think that ability to deal with conflict and, someone's going to mess up. I'm going to mess up. How are we going to deal with this? Are we going to look at each other and blame each other? Because those are the losing teams that I've always been on. When we start pointing the finger, but the teams that especially have found success, we always had this. It's an interesting mix of like radical accountability and then also like a love that doesn't blame each other, that doesn't like, I'm going to hold you accountable without blaming you. And that's such a fine line. And I think it's something that really, I don't know if I would have ever gotten to that understanding without football. It's definitely something about football where everybody has to contribute. Like you were a kicker, but we're holding you to the same standard as me as a DB, who we're holding the quarterback to the same standard, who we're holding the offensive lineman to the same standard. And all of us pouring into this common goal is it's second to none to me. Like, I don't think there's any other sport that really makes you have that type of accountability, but also that level of trust in the other person to do their job too. So football has been, um, those like rules or like everything kind of comes back to like something I heard from a coach. I get to a new area in business and I'm like, yeah, like I had a coach who like had a saying about that or a model for that. So football has been so much for me. I'll say everything.
Yeah. That's incredible, man. I totally agree with you in holding people accountable. Everyone's got to do their job and it's hard. You build rapport with people going through hard things, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's really hard to replicate in business all the time where people want to clock in and clock out, but you really can't do that and be a phenomenal football player. And so you spend this time in the NFL and then you go to Japan. What is the Japanese professional football league like?
It's different. It's much, much, much different. Well, I mean, it's really based around how different their culture is. And so for a lot of things, the Japanese culture is completely opposite of the American culture or the Western culture. And especially as you dive deeper and deeper into it, like I'll give you an example. This is always the example I give people when I try to say this. Like, you know how we have the saying in America, the squeaky oil gets the wheel,
Hmm. Hmm.
which is basically like if you need something, you got to speak up for yourself. Like, don't expect things to just happen for you. Like, go out into the world and like change things. It's kind of the what I was brought up on and like the energy that we have as Americans. Well, they have literally the exact like type of phrase in Japan, but it means the opposite. Theirs is the nail that sticks out gets hammered down. So they really value falling in line, and at best it's like really tight collaboration, but when you're American who's used to just like breaking things and like asking for like not asking for permission but asking for forgiveness, it's totally opposite, especially as a football player. Like I'm like, no, like let's do something different. Like let's change that. That doesn't work. And that's not the way that things get done out here. You have to work in collaboration in unison. You have to get consensus from the group. You have to really put the group ideas first and not be focused on your individual desires or your individual wants, which was super hard for me, especially I'm coming from a pretty, like my ego was high. Like I'm coming from the NFL. I'm like, everyone should listen to me. Like I have the answers,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
that's the perspective that I had in those days for sure. And I had to really learn a real sense of humility and then also learn that the communication styles are different. I can't just come out and say, hey, we should just change this. I have to be different about it in order to be effective. And that was definitely a challenge in the first couple of years, but something that I really grew to appreciate as I started to understand the customs here, understand the culture a little bit differently. And at a certain, like, there is still some, hey, like, you got to kind of break things. There is like a still towing that line because at the same time, they do appreciate, uh, the innovation and like the energy of where we come from, but they do have a culture that's way longer than America's even been around, you know? And so there's a sense of there is our culture and our culture works and we believe in it. So there's a fine line of like pushing for innovation, but also respecting customs and respecting tradition.
Yeah. That's incredible. Definitely want to dive in deeper. Before we go there, another Loyola Cub, Tom Welsh, he's currently playing pro basketball in Japan. And
Yeah.
he says that no matter what team, home or away, if you do something great, you have a dunk or you hit a deep three, they applaud for both teams.
Yeah.
Is that the same in football?
Football is a little different because
Okay.
football is it's like they don't even call it just football. They call it American football. Like
Mm.
football brings with it a bit of American culture because it is like kind of our thing. So it's a little different. Like the people who are into football out here, they're typically into American culture a little differently too.
Hmm. Hmm.
So it's slightly different, but it's not completely different. There is still a sense of like, yeah, they're just excited about what good happens. And there's a so interesting. I had a older mentor out here, Dave, who was one of the first Americans to be involved in Japanese football. And he tells a story about when he was coaching, this is years ago, before they had changed the rules, their ultimate game was a tie. So when a tie happens, they're like, okay, that's incredible. Like a tie, everybody goes home happy. Like, okay, cool. And he was pissed. He was furious
Yeah.
because they ended the game in a tie. And he was like, wait, what? Like, wait, the game's over? Like, what? And it was just like, it's that incredible. And it's so funny because a lot of those things you don't realize until they happen. Like he's coaching the game. He's like close game, like trying to win. Like they're tied up. It hits 0-0 and they call the game. And he's like, wait, what? Like what? We just walked off? Like, so there is still a sense of like, there's that consensus approach. Like, okay, everyone won. Like, okay, it's all good. Like that's the ultimate goal in some ways.
Yeah. And pragmatically, are there rules in Japanese football where you can only have a certain amount of non-Japanese players?
Yeah, yeah. So when I was playing, it was 4 per team and 2 on the field at once. So typically what teams would do, they'd have like a quarterback and a running back, and then they'd have a DB and a D lineman or some combination. Typically they have a quarterback and then some type of skill position, and then typically somebody in the front 7 and then somebody in the back end. And I think since they've changed it to only 3 per team, so I don't know how that's working now, but I know the league is always kind of in flux. Like there's a lot of things always moving around and changing. So they may be down to 3 now, but I'm not totally sure.
Yeah. And how do you deal with the language barrier, right? If you're, I don't know
Yeah.
if you speak Japanese, but day one, man, do you have a translator?
Had a translator day one. He would be there sometimes, not all the time. There would be, shout out to my guy Yagi. He actually lives in New York now. He was a Japanese player, but spoke perfect English. So he would be the impromptu translator a lot of times. And
Yeah.
yeah, eventually it was like, gotta learn Japanese. Yeah. So my Japanese is not perfect yet. It's not fluent at all, but I'm pretty decent. I can get around. I can navigate.
That's awesome. I know we're not even close to this, but there's a lot of studies that suggest learning another language later in life really helps keep your brain sharp and will fend things off like dementia. Not that
Yeah.
you're anywhere close to that, but it's great that you're flexing that muscle.
Yeah, and I'm always thinking about those things too because the rates are rising. Like I even saw what you do with your company. Like I'm always thinking about that too. Like fertility. Like I'm always things are happening fast. The
Yeah.
rate at which these long-term chronic diseases are affecting people younger and younger is definitely something that I'm always paying attention to, especially being in wellness. It's something that I have to speak to. Like I have clients who are older than me who ask me, especially because like my real soft spot, like I love working with clients who are elders. Like those are my favorite people to work with. They got the best stories and they're just the most invested because it's real for them. It's not about muscles. It's about being able to walk. So I'm always thinking about those things. And yeah, I know about that. Like a language really, really helps like sharpen the mind.
Yeah. And so you played 5 seasons with the
Okay.
Nojima Saga Mihara Rise.
Yeah,
Forgive my pronunciation there.
that was pretty good.
That's a thanks, man. That's a long time. And how did you decide to hang up the cleats, man, and move on? I know it's a really difficult decision to make.
You know, Conrad, I always was, even before, like when I was thinking I'm going to go to the NFL, I'm going to make $1 million in the NFL, I'm going to be a first round draft pick. I was always, I'm done at 30. Like I'm not going to be running around on the field at 30. And I always wanted to, I had this ideal of being a businessman. Like I, the NFL was definitely the childhood dream, but I always was forward thinking. I think a lot of that comes with Loyola and the people that you're surrounded by and understanding that even best case scenario, you play till what is LeBron like in his 40s now?
Yeah.
Football players don't last that long. I think maybe Tom Brady got to like 45. Best case scenario, you get there, but you still got another 40 years ahead of you. So I was always like, I don't want to be, first off, I never wanted to retire and be broken down. Like I always wanted to have my health. I wanted to be able to think clearly. And then I always saw like being a businessman as the ultimate goal for me. Like that was what was really cool for me. That was the unknown. That was the real thing to conquer. Football was I've been playing since I was 7. Like this is just playing another game. So I knew once I started to get to 30, I think I retired at 29. I was like, yeah, I'm excited about what's next. I was really excited about the future and felt like I had accomplished more than I even could have dreamed. Like I would have never dreamt playing 5 years in Japan. It was I was just felt so good. I felt so blessed for what I had accomplished and was excited about the new challenges.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. So you move back to LA, you're in Marina Del Rey, get into health coaching. Tell me about your company, man. I'm so excited to hear about it. Bevida Wellness, what was the catalyst? How did you get the initial idea to start this company?
Yeah, so it was a combination of a couple of things. So I told you the story about really wanting to shift the narrative around having bad genes and really wanting to affect the way that my community sees health. From this thing that is very hard and you got to go to the gym and you got to do all of these things. So when I first came home, I just wanted to learn. Like I knew the position that I was in. I've been an athlete for most of my life. I want to learn some things about business. And then I also want to learn, LA has one of the best fitness cultures, I would say, in the world. Like everyone is somewhat health conscious or thinking about it. So I went and worked at Equinox to really immerse myself in a group of people who knew more than me, like people who had been doing fitness for a long time. And so that was a great experience because all of my clients, for the most part, were people who were already doing things, already had things that I could learn from about what meal prepping they were doing or what wearable, like what their aura ring was saying. So they really allowed me to get with people who were already on the journey of maximizing their fitness and wanted to like fine tune things even more. So that was a great experience. And then also like the colleagues and the other trainers that I was working around were people who had been in the game for 10 years, 15 years, and had seen all of the different fads and the trends come and go, but had really a solid foundation of what they taught and what they believed in. And so that was a great opportunity. But what was missing was that so I was in Japan during the pandemic, and I don't know if you remember at the top of the pandemic, but they were talking about how the elderly were gonna really suffer first, and that they were gonna be the ones who had a really hard time. And to some extent, from the stories I got from America, that was what was happening. But Japan has one of the oldest societies and like a lot of elders around here. Both of my elders at the time on both sides, my neighbors, were in their 70s and 80s, and nothing really happened. Like a lot of people are going to be going through a lot of rough times. I saw elders still doing their thing. They just had masks on, like they're out in their gardens, they were walking. And it really hit me that, it's not because they're going to the gym 3 times a week. It's not because they have this latest biohacking routine or anything like that. They just really take the time to have a lifestyle that promotes their wellness. So most people ride the train, which means you're walking to the train, which means you're waking up early enough and you're outside in that early morning sunlight to set your circadian rhythm. And their culture is built around making things accessible for you to have health. So the prices of the food for organic, healthy, clean food are not astronomical. You don't have to go to the Erewhon to have the latest organic, nice food. Like every grocery store has the eggs that have the really, really deep orange yolk and like really, really good stuff. So I just felt like the culture in LA, while it was good and it was teaching me a lot of the new things, they were missing just some of the foundational elements of just, hey, wake up early enough to get some sunlight in your eyes so you can say your circadian rhythm. A lot of these things that maybe can't be sold as readily or can't be put into a pill and like advertised the same way are really the foundational things that I saw a lot of the elders out here being able to take advantage of and live longer, healthier lives. So from working at Equinox, I really started to just do training outside of the equinox and doing that under the head of my company. But even then, I was like, training is cool. Like, I love to give people a really good workout, but the impact that I'm having in these conversations of, hey, Lee, what do you think I should eat? Or, hey, Lee, like, what? I still have like some energy problems. Like, what do you think about this? Like, what's happening? As I started to even learn more and read more books about, okay, what's really happening, it just became really apparent to me that while I could give you a strength training routine and we could get you lifting and we could get you doing these things, like that's not what's really going to move the lever for you, especially for the people that I like to work with who are high stress people who may be sitting inside all day, who may be seated all day. Like it's a lifestyle change that we really got to get you to. And then also the connection with nature. A lot of people are just so disconnected from where their food comes from, don't really have a lot of opportunities to get out in nature and really experience those benefits. So that was where I saw a gap and the opportunity to really help people in a different way.
That's incredible, man. And I think I totally agree with you on the exercise only goes so far, right? You can't out train a bad diet. And, when you look at how your body is burning calories, your basal metabolic rate, which is, when you're just sitting and living, that's like 75% of the calories burned, right? Physical activity is 5%. And so what you're putting in your body is so important. And so now you're back in Japan and you're going, to my understanding, and exploring to find the best food. Is the goal to bring that back to the United States, or is the goal to learn as much as you can and bring practices back?
Yeah, so I would say the latter is more of the goal, but then there's also a real goal to help in Japan as well. So with all of the things that they do very well, especially in the countryside towns and the things that are rooted in their culture, there's also a creeping influence, and it's not even creeping. There's a huge influence of the Western diets and then the Western attitudes towards just lifestyle that are really shifting how things happen here. So in Japan, the real thing that especially my partners are super focused on is the mental health issues that are happening here that it's hard to talk about because a lot of them do coincide with the culture. So especially in the cities, there's a very intense work culture. And then there's also a culture of not being able to express what's happening to you and not being able to speak about any type of, how do I say, I don't want to say issues you're dealing with, but I think that's the best way to say it. Like there's a culture of silence and holding things in and not expressing things that is something that we're really focused on helping out because it affects everyone here. It affects the Japanese people here, and then it also affects the foreign community here. And there's a high rate of, I don't know if you're even supposed to say this word if we have to block it out, but there's a very high rate of suicide here. That is something that doesn't really get expressed and doesn't really get talked about. So that is my partners, the Legacy Foundation. They are really, really focused on that. Like that is a huge goal for them because they've even had people within the community take their lives. I think they said something like over the last holiday season, there were 6 men who took their lives. And it's something that they really, really are focused on changing and allowing opportunities and spaces for people to express themselves and not feel like they're hopeless and they get to that point. So there's that area. And then there's the other side of just the demographics of Japan where these countryside towns that have such this rich culture and a lot of this just healthy ways of living and this cultural legacy. Well, a lot of these kids of these older farmers are moving to the cities. They don't see the value in farming. They're like, that's countryside life. Like, that's old. We want to be in the city where things are happening and new and moving. And so these farmers who have been doing this for generations and generations and have these techniques that most of the world doesn't even know, they're not on YouTube. They're not just widely expressed out there. these techniques are being lost with them. So a lot of farms are being abandoned. There's homes that are being abandoned, and there's not a lot of energy around revitalizing and keeping this together. Now, the government understands it because they're looking at it like, okay, we can't lose these countryside towns. This is like the heart of the culture and the heart of the country as well. And so they are really invested in trying to get people back. And so that's also the area that I'm trying to fill is I learned so much from being on a farm, and I learned so much about wellness and how to take care of myself and the practices that I want to spread to people. So I really want to capture their legacies and continue this and invite people out. Like, I think one of the best opportunities is to get artists to come out because there is nothing like being in a countryside town to inspire some creativity. Like I heard you saying earlier, we talked about how you're interested in like finding the more creative path for yourself. And I think a lot of what inspires the creativity is the opportunity to get away from all of the noise and to get into a place of like, oh, I can hear my thoughts. Like I get out here and it was crazy. This morning I'm writing poetry. I'm like, yeah, this always happens when I come back to Japan. Like it starts getting quiet and I start writing poetry. Like things just start changing. And so I think that that is a great opportunity to get people out into these countryside towns to understand the value of the culture and the value of what it means to be in relationship with the land and in relationship with these farmers. And then also like they have some stuff that would seem magical to you. Like some of the practices that they have about how they grow their food are wild. And like these are the legacies that can't just die out with this generation. Like they have to be recorded and documented and told and passed down.
So I just looked it up. Um, Over 20% of agricultural land in Japan is registered to deceased individuals, with heirs either unaware of their inheritance or uninterested in farming. So,
Yeah.
what's the solution here, right? How can we incentivize the next generation to get interested in farming when everyone wants to be a YouTuber?
You could be a YouTuber on the farm. I'm going to be a YouTuber on the farm.
Yeah, that's the
Yeah,
answer.
that's the answer. That
Yeah.
100%. I mean, from my perspective, what I see happening with AI, I'm like, the only thing that we're going to have left is creativity and our relationship to each other and to the land. And I think there's no better place to do that than in a countryside town in Japan. That's my perspective. I'm like, the peace that you get, like watching just the seasons change and it's hard for me to even put into words the energy of these places that have been cultivated over generations. Like these places have been cultivated for longer than America's been around and sometimes have been in certain families for that long. Like the history that they have and like the attention to detail that they have on how they cultivate the land and how they work with it is something that I'm like, yo, this is incredible. This is magical stuff that can't be allowed to just like pass away with this last generation. So I think we get cameras out to the countryside town for sure. We get people on YouTube, and then we like with art. I think that there's such an opportunity to be creative around these things. Like when I look at why people go to Costa Rica and do those long tours, those wellness retreats out there is because of the energy in those jungles and like how good it feels and how rejuvenated you get from those places. I think Japan is just waiting to be the next place.
Yeah. I totally agree with you, man. I think there is a huge misunderstood part of the world and nature and energy. And I lived in New York the last couple of years. Now I'm in LA and I definitely feel depleted to your point. And then you go to a place that has nature. I feel like it does really recharge you in a way that's not easily described. Right. And you kind of said it earlier and you're like, dang, I'm back in Japan and now I'm just inspired to write poetry. Right. I think that's just not something that we fully understand, but I think there's a ton of value. And so, where should we start pragmatically with everything you've learned? I'm in the US, we're in the US. Where would you have people start right? Would you have them start with just, hey, get back on your diet and exercise and eat whole foods? What have you learned from there that we could start doing pragmatically in the States?
Yeah, yeah, that's a great question because it can seem like a lot to really shift things. I think what I always tell people when I'm working with a client for the first time, that morning sunlight is a game changer. And people talk about it. I know if you look on Instagram, there's always people like showing off their morning routine or this is my perfect morning routine. And that is something that actually from listening to clients, I've started to become more laxed around. Like you don't got to hit all these different checkpoints because people, it starts to feel like abnormal for them. Like, hey, like this isn't, I don't want to be hitting checkpoints as soon as I wake up. But if there's anything you can do that will really shift yourself, especially your energy, is getting outside and getting 10 minutes of morning sunlight. It hits every one of your cells. Every one of your cells has this, I think it's called a super something nucleus. It's a SCN that every one of your cells is on this circadian clock. And so when you're not on that right timing, it just disrupts everything. And the only thing that they all listen to is the sunlight. So morning sunlight is one that is a game changer for anyone and everyone. And that one's really, really backed by science. It's very kind of well regarded as something to really get you restarted. And then I think the next one that is super common, like it's not groundbreaking news, is really hydration, like getting hydrated and making sure you stay hydrated and understanding how to use electrolytes and minerals to make sure you get cellular hydration. That is another key one that really, really, really is a game changer. Another one that there is no scientist you're going to find that's going to say, nah, actually, water is not that important. Like
Yeah.
those are the two that I would say are really, really grounded in science and are things that everyone should be doing. Now, when we get on the other side of things that may not have the same level of, I would say, consensus in science, but for me have been really groundbreaking and really changing, I would say is having some type of plant around you, growing something and taking care of something. Now, there are studies that show that it really, really does help. I'm sure that you can find people who are going to be like, oh, that's just like woo woo, like that's not really a big thing. But the practice and the act of taking care of something and growing a plant and really, really I would say is a huge benefit if it's something you eat, if you take care of like, even if it's just like a little herb garden that sits in your windowsill. There is something that is different about watching something grow that you take care of it, harvesting it, and then cooking with it that I think is a game changer. Something that like you won't be the same after you really go through that process a couple times. And then the other one would be grounding. And so this is a practice that's called, it can be called grounding or earthing, like people call it different things, but it's basically just getting your bare skin in contact with the earth. So most of the times it's people walking barefoot on grass or on some type of natural surface. Sand is one that I really like. Like being in LA, that was something that I would do all the time, go to the beach and get my bare feet on the sand. But there's a electron transfer that happens and a energy transfer where you kind of offload some things and then the earth kind of recharges you too. And doing that one consistently as well is something that I think is a game changer for energy, for health, for your immune function. It really, really changes everything to me. So those two, I couldn't pull up the exact studies around like exactly what it does or like the exact science behind it, but those two are ones that you grow your own food, even if it's something little. Like it doesn't have to be like I have a home garden and I take care of all my own food and I only eat from my garden, but just like a little tomato plant or a herb plant, there's something really magical about like taking care of something, watching it grow and then harvesting it. And then like being in contact with nature, even if it's just your little grass patch in front of your house, really taking that time to 15 minutes a day, walking on the grass and having that contact with it. Those are things that anyone, anywhere can do regardless. Even if you're in New York City, you could find a central park, you could get somewhere and get barefoot on the grass and have that exchange.
Yeah. It's so funny. I spoke to a doctor literally yesterday, Dr. Sarah Green, and she said that one of the best thing that works for her patients who are having trouble sleeping is grounding. And she said she's tried a bunch of other things, and she said for some reason grounding really works. And she said I can't explain it, but it works for a lot of my patients.
Yeah,
So to your point, I think there's a ton of things with energy transfer. I think you said it in a really cool and clear way that we just don't understand yet, right? With how energy moves between people, between the earth. I think on a relationship level too, I think sometimes you meet people and you're just really attracted to them, right? You really, not necessarily in a sexual way, but you're just like, wow, I'm just really drawn to this person. Like I want to work for them, or I want to date them, or I want to be their friend. And I think a lot of that is energy that I don't think we fully understand yet.
totally, 100%.
Yeah. Yeah. Dude, that's awesome. And so I have to ask, you live on a farm in Japan. What's the city that you live in? What's it called?
Takasaki.
So you live in Takasaki. How is dating out there?
Man, I actually have a girlfriend
Okay.
and I brought her from America. So
Okay.
I brought her with me. Yeah, yeah. So in that 2 year time of me being back in America, like after I retired, I met an incredible woman, and she's an artist. So she has opened up like my artistic side and my creative side in an incredible way. And her focus with her art is also wellness, and it also comes from her family background. So she lost her mother, and the only way that she was able to process and deal with the grief was through her art. And she had grown up in musical theater, and so she was a lifetime artist. Both of her parents were artists as well, but that was the moment that it really prompted her to start her organization and start to teach others how to process their grief or whatever they're going through, or even just open up their creative side through her art practices. So yeah, it's been very nice to bring someone with me and to
Yeah.
yeah, to be kind of locked in and be focused, because dating can be a whirlwind out here. It can be a lot.
Yeah. I can't imagine Hinge and Raya and Takasaki is the best place in the world. But that's great. And how'd you guys meet?
So we actually knew of each other growing up. So she went to, what is that school? Uni. So I knew of her, but we kind of just ran in like adjacent circles, and then we actually reconnected back in LA on a farm. There's this really cool farm that's called Root Down LA, and they have an organization that provides healthy food to the community, and then they partner with Carver Middle School to teach the kids how to farm and how to make nutritious and healthy vegetables. So they have these garden workshop days that happen at the last Saturday of every month. And me just being a sponge and like learning from different places and trying to get involved in the urban agriculture world out there, I would go to a lot of them. I ended up seeing her at one. We started to really just develop a really cool friendship around some of our common interests. And then we started to date, and yeah, now we have moved to Japan together.
That's awesome, man. Dang. Well, I think I got to take you up on this, dude. We got to get some artists up to Japan and some YouTubers and make
One,
farming cool. So, I mean, I don't know how long you're out there, but next time I'm coming, we're going to bring some cameras and we're going to make some content, dude. I think we could make some really cool stuff.
100%. Yeah, no, I'm waiting for you, man. Pull up.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll pull up. It's a quick flight from LA, like 12
That's
hours
what
or
I'm saying. It's
something.
really not bad from LA.
Yeah, it's not bad. It's not bad. I love it, man. Okay, dude. So moving forward, we're gonna move on. My favorite part to the speed round. So I'm gonna give you a short question, and then just give me a one-word answer as best you can.
Okay.
Favorite team you ever played on?
Houston Cougars.
Most athletic teammate you ever played with?
Anthony Barr.
Who's the best trash talker you ever played?
Steven Akins.
Ooh, okay. What's the worst football workout?
Up downs.
God, I hate them. What's your favorite cheat meal?
Chocolate cake.
Yeah, so good. What's the hardest hit you ever took? And do you remember who it was from?
Freshman football, I was playing running back, and I forget. I have no idea who this person was. I can't even tell you what team I was playing. Um, But yeah, I got popped. I was running like an ISO play, didn't see the linebacker,
Yeah.
and just got popped.
What's the best thing about playing football in Japan?
The fans. The fans
Yeah.
are
What's the
incredible.
worst? What's the worst thing?
The worst thing about playing football in Japan. Can't find shoes my size. Yeah, the cleats don't run my size. Had to order them.
Like ship them from the U.S. or
Yeah,
yeah. What's your favorite way now to recover?
spend time in nature.
Yeah. What's one word to describe your current mindset?
Mm, limitless.
Yeah. If you could give high school Lee one piece of advice, what would it be?
Mm, high school Lee. What a character that guy was.
Yeah, he was the man. He is the man.
Be patient.
It's good. What's the best piece of advice that you ever received?
Grow where you're planted.
What's your life motto?
Do I need one of these? A life motto.
We could brainstorm right now together.
Yeah, let me work on that. What's your life motto? Do you have one?
Life's about what you did, not what you didn't.
Ooh,
So just
that's
say
good.
yes to things.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah. We'll circle back. We'll have a follow-on
Yeah,
pod when we're
let's
making our
follow
YouTube
up on that.
videos. Yeah. Coffee and red meat. Do you eat them?
Yes.
Yep. Same. Coffee every day?
No.
Nice. Same. I don't want to be beholden to one thing, you know? I don't want to need anything every day.
Right. And matcha is incredible. Like I'm in the land
Oh
of
my
matcha
God,
now.
matcha slap. I can't even imagine where you are. It must be incredible there. What's next for Bevida?
Yeah. So Bevida, and I only
Bevida.
correct
I'm
you
sorry.
because it was
Bevida. My bad.
named after both my grandmothers. So
Awesome.
yeah. So next is we are going to really keep expanding our health coaching practice. So expanding. I want to bring on other coaches to deliver the program. And then also moving into some digital programs where people don't necessarily have to have a coach, but they can kind of follow at their own pace. And then on a project scale, it's really building out what this wellness retreat, artist retreat center in Japan looks like. So, really honing in with the locals, really getting their understanding and building that thing out.
That's awesome. Last question. What's next for Lee Hightower?
Next for Lee Hightower is continuing to learn, man. I think we're in such an incredible time. I just read this book called The Energy Paradox by, I want to say, Dr. Stephen Gundry. And man, blew my mind way open. Like a lot of the things were aligned with the things that I've practiced and have really preached to others, but also like this understanding of lectins was crazy to me. I was like, oh, okay, like that's a whole new world. So especially with being here now and not in LA and not in go mode, I'm really excited to become a student. I feel like I'm about to put myself through like this master's program of growing food and learning from these locals, learning these elders. I'm about to learn beekeeping. I'm so excited about that. So I'm sponging things up. I'm in, as our journeys with football, like we didn't get, I think, the same opportunity to do study abroad programs or, all of these different things. So I feel like I'm in like my master's program now. I feel like I'm going back to school, but just in real life.
That's awesome. Lee, this has been great, man. You have an incredible aura. Your energy. I know you're halfway across the world, but I swear, man, I can just feel it.
Man, Conrad, I appreciate that, man. And I think you feel it because you radiate it. Man, you are 100% the same. Everything that you express is something that you give off as well. So, man,
Yeah.
it's been great to connect again.
Yeah, it's been great. And just to sign off, where can people find you, find your company to follow along?
Yeah, for sure. So right now I'm in a Instagram detox. So
Okay.
mainly on LinkedIn, Lee Hightower on LinkedIn, Bevida Wellness is on LinkedIn. And once I figure out, that's one thing that I'm really learning, like what is my relationship to Instagram? It's a wild world on that social media site. So I'm sure at some point I'll get back engaged, but for now, LinkedIn is the place to find me.
I love it. Awesome. Lee, thanks for coming on, man. This has been great. Really appreciate your time.
And I appreciate you, Conrad. Thank you.